What happened next on live TV left Mark Levin speechless and might have changed how the U.S. sees young black lawyers. The 76-year-old right-wing host thought he could embarrass Representative Jasmine Crockett about her law school in front of everyone. He was dead wrong. As soon as Crockett grabbed that beige envelope and said, "Mr. Levin, let's talk about qualifications," the whole studio went silent. What she revealed didn't just destroy Levin's argument, it exposed a huge problem with how the courts try to shut down voices. What made this fight even wilder was what happened before. Just before the show, Levin was bragging to the producers about how he was going to teach this newbie legislator a lesson about real legal skill. He was so sure of himself that he actually asked for more time for what he called a teaching moment for the viewers. The producers, sensing drama, agreed to extend the segment. They had no idea they were about to see the most epic intellectual beatdown ever aired. Levin's team thought they had a foolproof plan. They looked into Crockett's law school record, saw it wasn't one of the top-ranked schools, and figured that would be enough to trash her credibility. They also had follow-up questions about her lack of Supreme Court internships and big law firm work. It was a move that had worked many times before against younger opponents. Before we get into this awesome battle, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And hit that subscribe button so you never miss these crazy political moments. Trust me, you'll want to see every second of what happens next. The fight started when Levin, famous for his aggressive questioning, decided to attack Crockett's legal past during what was supposed to be a normal policy discussion. He had no idea Crockett was ready for war. Even the set seemed to sense the coming storm. Camera operators shifted positions, knowing something bigger than a policy debate was about to go down. The lighting crew adjusted the lights to create dramatic shadows, and the director in the control room was already signaling to keep the cameras rolling no matter what. This was the kind of broadcast that makes legends and breaks reputations. In the background, the crew was already whispering about what was about to happen. A veteran stage manager, a guy with over 20 years in the biz, said he could feel the tension the moment they walked in. He said, "You just get a sense for these things. Some talks are just talks, but others are like boxing matches." This one felt like a fight from the start. The show's main producer, watching from the control room, made a quick call that turned out to be genius. Instead of sticking to the ad breaks, she told her team to keep filming, no matter how long the argument went on. "I knew we were about to see something amazing," she said later. "You don't interrupt history for commercials." Mark Levin sat down at the table, his trademark scowl already there, as he adjusted his glasses. At 76, the former Reagan administration lawyer had made a career out of crushing opponents with fast legal arguments and deep knowledge. His radio show was huge, and his books were always bestsellers. That night, he was sure he'd found an easy target. Levin hadn't prepped much for this. His team had given him some basic info on Crockett. Young, black, a liberal congresswoman from Texas, went to a historically black law school. In his mind, that was all he needed. He'd built his career on intimidating rivals with his fancy degrees and years in broadcasting. His plan of attack was simple: question her credentials early, assert dominance, and then control the rest of the conversation. What Levin didn't know was that Crockett was ready for it. Her team had watched hours of his old debates, noting his habit of questioning people's education and work experience to undermine them before they could even make their points. They were ready for that exact move. Across from him sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, 43, her natural hair perfectly styled, wearing a sharp navy blue blazer that just commanded respect. The Texas liberal had been making waves since she got to Congress, but a lot of older people still saw her as just another inexperienced politician with no real legal chops. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Crockett's path to that moment was anything but typical. She grew up in a working-class family in Missouri, watching her parents work multiple jobs to make ends meet. Her dad drove a truck during the day and worked security at night. Her mom cleaned offices early in the morning before coming home to get the kids ready for school. Education wasn't just important in the Crockett house, it was seen as the only way to a better life. When Crockett decided to study law, she faced the same choice many bright kids from poor backgrounds face: go to a big-name school and end up with crazy debt, or pick a good school that wouldn't bankrupt her family. She chose Prairie View A&M not because it was her only option, but because she looked at their bar exam pass rates, their commitment to training lawyers who would help their communities, and their history of producing lawyers who actually practiced law, not just talked about it. Her time at law school was game-changing. Unlike some fancy schools that are all talk, Prairie View focused on real-world skills and how things work out there. Students didn't just study law, they wrote briefs, argued cases, and even represented real clients with supervision. By the time Crockett graduated with honors, she had already argued in front of a national judge and helped get a civil rights deal that changed rules in the region. But what really made Crockett stand out was what she did after graduating. While many graduates from top schools went straight to firms to do research, Crockett immediately started taking on tough civil rights cases that really mattered to people. Her first big win came just 2 years after law school, when she successfully fought her unfair hiring practice at a big company. She not only got money for her clients, but also changed the rules, which helped thousands of workers. Her reputation in legal circles grew quietly but steadily. She wasn't giving speeches or writing fancy articles. She was in court, winning cases, and setting precedents. Federal judges started to recognize her name on court papers, knowing that if Jasmine Crockett was involved, the legal arguments would be complete, well-researched, and convincing. What many didn't know was that Crockett had turned down many high-paying offers from well-known firms after graduation. These big firms had tried to recruit her, offering salaries that would have changed her family's life. But Crockett had a different idea for her career. She wanted to use her legal skills to really make a difference in people's lives, not to help companies dodge taxes or find loopholes. Her decision to focus on civil rights and law wasn't just something she thought of. It was personal. Growing up, she had seen her parents face unfair treatment that they couldn't afford to fight legally. She had seen talented friends discouraged from going to school because they were told they weren't good enough. Her legal career became her way of making sure that others wouldn't face the same problems without someone to stand up for them. By the time she got into politics, Crockett had built a legal record that most lawyers could only dream of. She had argued in front of federal appeals courts, won important civil rights cases, and earned respect from legal groups across the political spectrum for her skill and honesty. Still, because she hadn't gone the traditional route, many old-school people still looked down on her. The stakes were high. This wasn't just about two lawyers arguing. It represented a generational and cultural fight that had been brewing in legal circles for years. Levin represented the old guard, the traditional right-wing legal system that had been in control for decades. Crockett represented something new, young, different, and ready to challenge the status quo. The host had barely finished talking about criminal justice reform when Levin leaned forward with that grin of his. He thought he had done his homework. Crockett had graduated from a historically black law school, not an Ivy League school. In Levin's mind, that made her an easy target. Before we argue about fairness, Levin began with that annoying tone he used for people he thought were beneath him. I think the audience should know about the legal backgrounds of the people making these claims. Crockett raised her eyebrows a little, but stayed calm. She'd heard this before. The questioning of her skills, the subtle digs about where she went to school, the idea that because she didn't go to Harvard or Yale, she wasn't worthy. I'm happy to talk about my background, Mr. Levin, she said, her voice steady, but with a hint that she was ready for anything. You could feel the tension building. People online were already sharing clips of the first exchange. This was turning into more than just an argument about policy. Crockett's team had spent weeks getting ready for this kind of attack. They knew Levin's game. He always went after people's credentials first, hoping to throw them off balance. But Crockett had turned that weakness into her advantage. Every document in that folder had been carefully checked and arranged for maximum impact. Her communications person, watching from the green room, had already prepared social media responses for different scenarios. But as he saw the fight unfold, he realized they might not need to do any damage control. They may even need to get ready for a victory lap. Levin's attack was quick and mean, designed to embarrass and belittle. Ms. Crockett, he said, leaning back in his chair like he'd done this a million times. You went to some law school in Texas that nobody's ever heard of, right? Some people gasped. That was really personal and direct, even for government TV. Levin kept going, clearly enjoying the reaction. I mean, let's be real here. When we're talking about serious legal issues, shouldn't we be hearing from lawyers who went to top law schools? I went to Temple University's law school, worked in the Reagan Justice Department, was chief of staff to Attorney General Edwin Meese. What are your qualifications besides getting elected to Congress? Crockett's jaw tightened a bit, but she kept her cool. Years of dealing with this stuff had taught her patience. Mr. Levin, are you saying that the quality of legal education only depends on how famous the school is? Yes, I am, Levin shot back, his voice louder. When you're talking about legal theory and fairness policy, experience and training matter, and frankly, your background doesn't make me trust that you can understand these complicated legal issues. His words hung in the air, like a challenge. People in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Some seemed to agree with Levin, but others looked genuinely offended by the personal nature of the attack. This wasn't about policy. It was about trying to destroy someone's reputation by questioning their abilities. In the green rooms, other guests waiting for later segments were glued to the screens. A former prosecutor waiting for the next hour shook his head and muttered, "He just made a huge mistake." A law professor from a well-known university watched with growing interest, realizing that Levin had just walked into a trap he didn't even know was there. Government aides from both parties were quickly taking notes. This kind of exchange could make or break careers, create big legal cases, and change the way people thought about competence and credibility in government. The host tried to interrupt, but Levin wasn't finished. Okay, here's a shot at rewriting that text to sound more human. Look, it's not about individuals, but U.S. citizens should know when someone's talking out of their depth. Just because you're a lawmaker doesn't make you a constitutional expert. The internet blew up. Levin vs. Crockett started trending fast. People on the right praised Levin for asking tough questions, while others saw it as plain prejudice and being rude. The split screen on TV was something else. Levin's face got redder by the second, his usual cool cracking under pressure. Crockett, though, stayed chill, like some chess master who already knew her next 10 moves while Levin was still learning. learning the rules. Newsrooms everywhere were scrambling to get legal experts on standby. This wasn't just some political squabble, it was becoming a social thing. It was a real-time story of the underdog taking on the giant, but with a twist no one saw coming. But here's the thing, while Levin's supporters in the audience were nodding along, others looked uneasy. Lots of black viewers looked upset, and even some white folks seemed to think Levin had gone too far. The tension wasn't just in the audience. Behind the cameras, the crew were exchanging knowing glances. The camera guys who'd seen tons of political debates knew something was different about this attack. It wasn't just about policy disagreements or differing philosophies. It felt personal, targeted, meant to humiliate instead of inform. A senior producer in the control room noticed something else fishy. Levin's attacks followed a pattern they'd seen before. Over the years, it seemed like his toughest questioning was saved for women of color and younger minority experts. White male guests, even those with less experience, rarely got such a grilling. About their qualifications, the makeup artist who'd worked with Crockett before the show remembered how calm the congresswoman was during prep. She wasn't nervous at all, the artist said. If anything, she seemed almost excited, like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole career. Crockett reached down and grabbed a manila envelope she'd put next to her seat. It felt deliberate, almost dramatic. Mr. Levin, since you want to talk about legal qualifications and expertise, I think that's a great idea. Actually, I've done some digging myself. Levin's smirk faltered a bit. This wasn't going as planned. Usually, when he questioned someone's credentials, they got defensive or tried to change the subject. Crockett was leaning in. You mentioned your law school, Crockett went on, opening the envelope. Temple University. It's a fine school. Don't get me wrong, but let's look at the numbers, shall we? Because you seem to think prestige matters so much. The audience was dead silent, sensing the conversation was about to take a sharp turn. Levin's confident look was starting to crack. You also mentioned working in the Reagan Justice Department, Crockett said, pulling out a paper. That's interesting because I have your employment records right here. You were a low-level staff attorney for 8 months before leaving for private practice. Hardly the high-profile constitutional role you've been implying all these years. Levin's face was turning bright red. Now hold on a second. Oh, I'm not finished, Mr. Levin, Crockett cut in, her voice still calm but now with an edge that made it clear she was just getting started. You want to compare legal credentials? Let's really compare them. The tension in the room was thick. Phones were popping up all over the audience as people realized they were seeing something special. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was about to become a lesson in how to handle a bully. Security guards at the studio entrances noticed something strange. People were actually trying to get in, not leave. Word spread through the building that something incredible was happening on stage. Interns ditched their coffee runs, producers left their control rooms, and even the cleaning crew found reasons to hang out near the studio doors. Everyone wanted to see what felt like a historic moment in political broadcasting. What happened next would be shared millions of times online and talked about in law schools for years to come. Crockett picked up her envelope and started tearing down Mark Levin's credibility. Mr. Levin, you're questioning my law school, she began, sounding like she'd been preparing for this moment for years. I went to Prairie View A&M University School of Law, a historically black school that you dismissed as some random law school in Texas no one's heard of. She grabbed the first paper. What you left out is that Prairie View A&M has one of the highest bar exam pass rates in Texas. It's been beating a lot of those fancy schools at putting out real lawyers who actually help their communities. The audience was hooked. Levin tried to jump in, but Crockett held up her hand. Let's talk about my background since you seem to think degrees matter so much. She picked up another paper. Before Congress, I spent over 10 years as a civil rights lawyer. I've argued cases before federal appeals courts, won big discrimination cases, and even written amicus briefs that national judges quoted. How many appeals cases have you argued, Mr. Levin? Levin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The question hung in the air. I'll answer that for you, Crockett said, her voice a little sharper. 0. You've never argued a case before an appeals court. Your entire legal career was 8 months as a junior lawyer and then years of writing books and doing radio shows. The audience started to murmur. This wasn't going as planned, but Crockett wasn't done. She grabbed what looked like academic records. You want to talk about legal scholarship? I graduated summa cum laude from my law school. I was on law review. I won the top graduate award. What were your law school grades, Mr. Levin? The silence was deafening. Levin's face had gone from red to pale. He clearly wasn't ready for this kind of detailed attack. And here's my favorite part, Crockett said, picking up what looked like a thick legal brief. This is a brief I filed in federal court just last year arguing a complicated constitutional issue about Fourth Amendment rights. The judge cited it, and it helped set a new precedent protecting people's rights. She looked straight at Levin. When was the last time you actually practiced law, Mr. Levin? When was the last time you filed a brief, questioned a witness, or represented a client? Because it looks to me like I'm the only real working lawyer in this conversation. The audience exploded. Some were cheering, others were gasping, and a few were even standing up. Social media was going crazy. Crockett Destroys was trending along with Levin versus Crockett. In the control room, the director was frantically signaling to the camera operators. "Get every angle," he muttered into his headset. "This is going to be replayed a million times." Even the camera crew, who were trained to be neutral, were exchanging amazed glances. In 20 years of broadcasting, none of them had ever seen anything like this methodical takedown of a supposedly unbeatable opponent. Meanwhile, at law firms across the country, associates were calling colleagues into their offices to watch the live feed. "This," said one senior associate at a major firm, "is what we mean when we talk about being prepared." But Crockett had saved the best for last. She picked up one last paper, and her expression turned almost triumphant. "Mr. Levin, you said that people should know when someone is talking outside their area of expertise. I agree completely. So I think the audience should know that while you've been spending years criticizing lawyers and judges on radio and TV, I've been in courtrooms actually doing real constitutional law." She held up the paper. "This is a letter from the National Bar Association recognizing my work on civil rights cases. And this," she picked up another sheet, "is an award from the American Bar Association for my contributions to legal scholarship." But Crockett wasn't finished. She reached into her envelope one more time and pulled out what looked like a thick legal brief bound in blue covers. "And this, Mr. Levin, is maybe my favorite piece of evidence. This is a Supreme Court amicus brief that I co-authored last year on Fourth Amendment rights in digital searches. 3 justices cited it in their opinions, including one appointed by a Republican president." She placed the brief on the table with a soft sound that somehow seemed to echo in the silent studio. "The summary said that regular warrant rules should be used for cops to search our phones and stuff. The court agreed, which is big since it protects the privacy of tons of Americans. So, Mr. Levin, when was the last time the top court cited your law work?" That question hit hard. Levin tried to speak, but nothing came out. All his TV and writing suddenly seemed meaningless compared to real legal work that actually mattered. Then Crockett said something that everyone would repeat later. She leaned in, her voice quiet, but picked up by the mic. "Mr. Levin, let me be clear. You came here tonight to doubt my skills because you figured a young black woman from a HBCU couldn't debate legal stuff with you, but you didn't even check my background, did you? You just judged me based on where I went to school." The room went silent. Even the AC seemed to stop. Levin looked shocked, mad, and like he realized he was being biased. "I've been doing this longer than you've been on the radio," Crockett went on, her voice firm. "I've won cases, argued in higher courts, and changed legal stuff more than you have in your whole career. I just did it quietly because I was too busy doing the work to talk about it on TV." The cameras caught Levin's face as he understood how wrong he was. This wasn't just some random opponent. This was someone who had prepared for this kind of attack and had proof that she was better in every way that mattered. What made it worse was how Crockett said it. She wasn't yelling or emotional. She was calm, professional, and almost teaching him a lesson. She was making a legal argument like she would in court, building her case until it was obvious she was right. The director was telling the camera people to zoom in on the audience. People looked shocked, respectful, and some were happy to see Levin get taken down a peg. One young black woman who looked like a law student was crying tears of joy because she was seeing herself represented on TV. The place was a mess. People were on their phones, posting and taking pictures. The host tried to get things back on track, but it was useless. Everyone wanted to see how Levin would respond. "So, Mr. Levin," Crockett said, sitting back and putting her papers down, "do you want to keep questioning my legal skills? Because I have like 20 more cases here that might be interesting to you." Levin just sat there, speechless, like he'd been run over by a truck. His quick wit was gone. For maybe the first time ever, Mark Levin had nothing to say. The audience was cheering now, and not just liberals. Some people who seemed like Levin supporters were clapping too. They had just seen something rare in politics, someone get completely destroyed with facts and skill. And next was wild. Levin finally spoke, but he sounded weak. "Well, that's something," he mumbled. Crockett, sounding almost gentle, like a teacher with a confused student, asked, "But you still don't think my school is good enough? 8 months as a junior lawyer makes you more qualified than someone with 10+ years of experience?" Levin barely whispered. "I think we should talk about the guidelines." The audience chuckled, not kindly. It was the sound of folks seeing a bully get what they deserved. The internet exploded. Naksha Crockett Destroys was trending on Twitter in minutes. TikTok was filled with clips, mostly the part where Levin realized he was outmatched. It spread like crazy. Within 2 hours, those clips had over 5 million views. Memes popped up instantly. Levin's cocky face before versus his shocked face after became a template for expectation versus reality posts. Young lawyers and law students made Crockett an overnight hero. One student made a TikTok video recreating Crockett's paper display with law textbooks, saying, "This is how you show up prepared." Law school libraries reported a huge demand for books on trial support and writing appeals. Older conservative pundits had a hard time defending Levin without sounding prejudiced and unprofessional. Younger conservatives were stuck admitting Crockett was just better prepared and knew more. Surprisingly, law enforcement and judges responded. 3 judges, 2 appointed by Republicans, made rare statements about valuing lawyers based on their work, not their background. A retired prosecutor wrote an op-ed titled, "I've argued against Jasmine Crockett and mocked Mark Levin couldn't carry her briefcase, which got shared over 100,000 times. The ACLU, which usually stays out of media spats, praised Crockett's work on digital privacy and called her a top legal mind. Even the right-leaning Federalist Society quietly canceled some of Levin's speaking gigs and added a panel on merit versus background with different voices. Conservative reactions were all over the place. Some tried to defend Levin, saying he was just asking valid questions, but that sounded hollow next to Crockett's takedown. Legal experts had more views. The American Bar Association's Twitter shared an article about valuing different legal educations. Some judges even shared posts about traditionally African American schools. Liberals were thrilled. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is what happens when you underestimate African American women." Jasmine Crockett just showed how to handle disrespect with facts and poise, but the biggest reactions came from law students and young lawyers, especially those from less prestigious schools. Online, they shared stories of facing challenges to their skills and celebrated seeing someone fight back. One student posted, "Watching Jasmine Crockett destroy Mark Levin just proved I belong here. Skills aren't about where you went to school." The effects of the argument became clear in the days after. Legal experts said the exchange showed problems with elitism in the legal field. Maria Rodriguez, a teacher at a state law school, said in a popular article that the Levin-Crockett thing showed the ongoing bias against lawyers from less prestigious schools. Crockett's popularity went way up fast. In 2 days, she was asked to speak at 3 big law schools and 2 civil rights groups. She was also invited on 5 government shows. Donations told an even clearer story. Crockett's campaign said they got over $200,000 in the day after the argument, mostly from people giving small amounts. They sent messages like, "Thanks for standing up and showing them how it's done." The argument also started discussion about how the media portrays people and who gets taken seriously as a legal voice. Some journalism schools began using the exchange as an example of how anchors should handle attacks on someone's skills during discussions. International media took notice too. British news showed a part about American government talk using the Crockett-Levin exchange to show a shift in political arguments. News sources in Germany and France said the argument was an example of how traditional power structures were being challenged in American government. Law professors started writing papers about the exchange with titles like Skills, Ability, and Society Change, The Crockett Thing, and Beyond School Reputation, Skill-Based Power in Today's Legal Talk. The argument went beyond government and became a case study in sociology, communications, and legal education. Corporate legal departments started rethinking how they hire people almost right away. Several big companies quietly started contacting traditionally black law schools and other less prestigious schools. They admitted that talent isn't only found at top-ranked schools. A partner at a well-known company said privately, "If we had ignored someone like Crockett because of her law school, we would have missed out on the exact kind of lawyer our clients want." Bar associations across the country started planning conferences about diversity in legal education and the field. The National Bar Association said they would start a scholarship program to help students from less prestigious schools who showed Crockett's skill and readiness. Law school admissions officers said there was a big increase in applications to historically black colleges and state schools. Many applicants said Crockett's example proved that anyone can be successful with the right hard work and readiness. The effects went beyond legal education. Medical schools, business schools, and other programs started looking at their own biases about school reputation versus real skill. A Harvard Business School professor said that they may have missed practical skill because they focused too much on where students went to college. Most importantly, the argument started conversations in business about leadership and skill. A Fortune 500 CEO watching the exchange at a leadership retreat told his team that they needed more of that kind of readiness in their company and that he didn't care where someone went to school. The media started looking at how discussions were held and how people gained trust. Big networks changed their rules a bit to focus on what people could actually do, not just where they came from or who they knew. Reporting schools now use the Crockett-Levin thing as a lesson on how personal attacks can backfire if the person is ready for them. Lawyers around the world noticed too. British lawyers talked about it in their groups, noting how different countries handle these kinds of challenges in court. One top lawyer in London wrote that American lawyers could learn from Crockett, that being good is more important than where you're from. Something cool happened after this, because Crockett showed how to use legal skills to help people. Donations to groups that give free legal help went up by over 40%. Lots of young lawyers started volunteering, saying Crockett inspired them to use their skills to help others. This whole thing also got people interested in the history of historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs. More people applied, and past students gave more money because they felt these schools, which had been unfairly ignored, deserved support. Maybe most importantly, Crockett became a new kind of person in government, someone who could handle tough debates with facts while still being fair and inclusive. Her calm, fact-based takedown of Levin became a model for other young politicians. For Levin, it was harder. His fans stayed with him, but it hurt his image as someone who always wins. Some of his speaking events were canceled, and people online, mostly talked about the Crockett thing when they mentioned him. This event changed how government clashes work. Crockett showed that old tricks like trying to intimidate people don't work if the person has their facts straight and isn't scared. Law professors started showing the clip in class, not just for the government stuff, but to show how to handle tough questions. They'd say, this is how you deal with someone trying to trip you up. The big takeaway, in a world where you can easily check facts, trying to win by being a bully is risky. Crockett proved that being ready, knowing your stuff, and staying calm beats bragging and power. As time passed, this became a big deal for everyone involved and for how we talk about government. It showed that the days of unchallenged attacks might be over and that people better be ready to back up their claims. The lesson was clear. In government, you earn respect by being good at what you do and being ready, not just by having a fancy title or reputation. Jasmine Crockett didn't just defend herself. She changed the game for a whole generation of leaders. And for every young lawyer, every student at a smaller school, every person who's been told they don't belong, Crockett's performance was inspiring. The message was simple. Skills matter, but being capable matters more. And if you have the facts, no amount of intimidation can beat the truth. The fight ended with Levin looking bad, but the big deal is what it meant. It's about new leaders who won't be judged by where they're from. They're set to prove their worth with skill, not just their background. Thanks for watching this crazy fight that's still shaking things up in government and the courts. If you liked watching Jasmine Crockett school Mark Levin with facts, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss similar governmental moments. Drop a comment and tell us what you thought about Crockett's awesome response. This sort of courage is changing how the game is played for good.